Hey guys, this is Louis Lin here, and today we're going to talk about how to use Anki for language learning. And I've been using Anki for about a little bit more than 2 years, and I can tell you from my experience, I've made every single mistake possible. There's a right way to use Anki, and there's a wrong way to use it, for language learning at least. And the first thing I want to talk about here today is I opened up a deck I used to use. I'm not using it anymore. It's based on Deaf Note, I believe, for Japanese. And let me illustrate the first point here is I want to answer the question, is it better to have to recognize the target language or to recall it? What I'm trying to say is, if you're trying to recognize, so that's the first type of card, right? You're just provided with the Japanese. And from this, you have to, in your head, you're asking yourself, okay, what does this mean? And you're translating it to English in your head, right? Demo yarasete. So it's like, but let me do it, right? And if this is correct, there you go. Here I have the demo yarasete is to allow to let somebody to do so. That's correct. I did the recognition correctly. So in this case, I would click pass. And if I couldn't do it, then I would just click fail. Now, that's recognition. Now, the second type of card, which I'm not using here, is recall. And recall is the opposite. You have the English. So for this card, for example, I would have, let me do it. And then I would have to translate it myself to Japanese or to any language that I'm learning, basically. So there are two types of cards, right? Recognition and recall. The question is, which one is better? I've done a lot of research on it because at the beginning I was using both, and I was asking myself the same question, like recognition or recall or both. And through all of my research, I stumbled upon a bunch of stuff, and I just want to show you one thing in particular that a lot of you guys probably already know. It's Stephen Krashen's theory of second language acquisition. So Stephen Krashen is he was professor at I believe at UCLA. I don't remember exactly, a university in California, and he's a linguist, and he's very influential in language learning. And what he found was that the only thing, the most important thing that you have to focus on for language learning is comprehensible input. So a lot of you guys already know about this, but basically, take a look at this. That's a quote. Comprehensible input is the crucial and necessary ingredient for the acquisition of language. What this means is that, I watched a lot of videos with Dr. Stephen Krashen. What he says is that you should emphasize input as opposed to input. That is, just by receiving messages, if you understand the messages that you're getting, then that's how language acquisition happens. And that may be the only way, although that has not been proven. So, using Dr. Krashen's approach, you should focus only on recognizing the cards. Now, there's also an argument to be made for recall cards, because recall is known as, you're going to remember things better if you recall, because you're forcing your mind to, come up with stuff that you learned in the past. I'm not making this up. You can actually look it up. I think there's a book called How to Be Good with Numbers or something by a professor as well. Anyway, so recall is one of the best way to actually train your mind to just recall things, right? It's more powerful than recognition. But the thing is, with language learning, it seems like there is this constant battle between this recognition and recall. So my point here is, it's not really clear at this point in the language learning field whether recognition or recall, which one is best. with recall, you're going to remember better. But the thing is, it's, from my experience, it's much, much more time consuming. So if I go to Anki right now and, with recognition, say for a deck here, if it takes me 30 minutes a day, if I have the same deck and it's a recall deck, not a recognition deck, it's going to take me at least 3 times as much time to get through it, just because I'm going to fail so much more. So, it's kind of, it's arguable which method you should be using. What I can tell you objectively is that I am using recognition only, and a lot of people are using recognition only because it works, it takes less time, and it follows the findings of Dr. Stephen Krashen, input as opposed to trying to output stuff. All right, so I made this point here, recognition, recall. Let's go to the next point, which is, how to choose your deck. So regardless of which language you're choosing, my personal recommendation would be, save yourself some time and get a pre-made deck. With Anki, you have a lot of flexibility in that you can actually create your own deck and have your own cards where you put the image, the sound, the sentences, but it's way too time consuming. If you go to the Anki website here I have it for Japanese, but let's go back to the root here. Okay, it's called Anki Web Shared Decks. You can type on Google, it's Anki Shared Decks, and you get here and it's a bunch of decks for different languages, even for other stuff. Say for example you want to learn Japanese, right? Click here and you have all these decks that are available for you for free. I mean, this is all free, right? All right, now let me run through the process of choosing the decks. In my experience, my personal recommendation would be always look for sentence decks. What this means is that you always want to look for decks that have, it's always sentences here and not individual words. So so that's a sentence, for example, right? And the following one as well, it's just sentences as opposed to individual words. The reasoning behind that is that with sentences, it's so much more fun. You're going to remember better. It's going to be more compelling. Individual words is just so boring to do. The other argument is perhaps stronger, is that you actually get to see the word in context, so you know how to use it. You get a sense of how to use it, So, okay, sentence. So do Command F if you're on a Mac, or Control F, and just sentence. Okay, I'm just gonna have to pause the video here because my disk is almost full. I'll just come back once this is solved. Alright, hello folks, once again. We're starting again. Sorry, I had a problem with had too much stuff on my computer, so the recording was about to stop. I had to delete some private videos I had on my computer. That's unfortunate, but let's go back into it. Alright, so as I was saying, Anki you should always choose sentence decks, and the easiest way to do that is to go to Anki Web and choose whatever language you're learning, and Control F or Command F for Macs, and look for sentence decks. So as you can see, there are a lot of them actually. Usually Anki Web makes sure that the best decks appear on top. That means the decks that have the most positive ratings. It's usually a good sign. Now, what I would look for as well is, first, the number of notes. So notes is just the number of cards, essentially. So this deck here has 400 cards. Then I would also look for audio. I try to always get decks with audio. So you have a sentence, and Anki is going to play it for you. You have the MP3 very often from a native speaker. That's a huge plus. So here, make sure that the number of notes, there's approximately the same number of audio files. So this is good here. Images, it's not mandatory, but it's always good. Here the problem is you have 400 cards, and that's just not enough, right? That's not a lot of cards. But the reason is here, it's because when you look at it, Japanese chord 2000 step 1, it's actually a lot of decks are like this on Anki. You have multiple parts, so step 1, step 2, there may be a step 3, so I would perhaps consider downloading this one, but otherwise you can keep looking. For example, here 600, it's not bad, but okay, you have a step 3 here with 400, so this is definitely something that's interesting. Anyways, you get it here. There's another one, a huge deck with 8,547 cards. That's pretty good, but it has no audio, which is really a no-no here. All right, so you get it. Sentences over words. Words are just boring. Make sure that you have sentences. Like here, it's a deck that I actually generated from Death Note using a piece of software I'll talk about in the future. But you can see how this is a huge advantage here. Let me show you the sound. There's also an MP3 here. I don't have it playing right now. Let me just modify it. So, by the way, I'm just going to take you through the interface of Def. Okay, I'm not really sure. Sound or audio? Okay, so let me show you my setup here with Death Note. It's not a deck that I downloaded from Anki Web. It's one that I generated myself, but this will give you an idea of the type of workflow, so to speak, that you're gonna have once you have a deck from Anki Web. So you have a card with maybe an image, maybe not, doesn't matter too much, and then you have the sentence in whatever language you're trying to learn, right? Then you try to you try to read it in your mind, and try to guess what it means in English. So in my case, たまたま死神がいて、そこに私が問い合わせた。I don't think, okay, the last word, I don't think I got it right here. I'm gonna show the answer. 居合わせた. Okay. Alright, so in this case, I failed on the last word. So everything here at the beginning was right, but I failed on the last word. So what I would do is I would click fail, and then it is just going to go back and schedule it back for me, okay? So you can notice that here I had the sound playing, once I just clicked show answer, and it's because I like to just, for Japanese at least, read the sentence and try to guess what the reading is, the pronunciation. That really depends on you, but okay, so now I think we're done with sentences versus words. I want to talk about something else. Okay, yeah, the things I really wish someone had told me in the beginning, like at the beginning with Anki. There are many traps. So the biggest trap is having too many cards, and let me explain to you why this is just, it's a huge trap. So with Anki, you have two types of cards. You have the cards that you need to review each day, which means that you have actually learned them at some point in the past, and then you have the new cards, the cards that you've never seen. The big mistake is to try to cram as many new cards as you can every day. Like typically anything above 15 is pretty dangerous. Let me explain to you why. At the beginning, when you install Anki and you have a new deck, you're gonna have potentially thousands of cards in your sentence deck, and you're gonna think to yourself, okay, well, 10 flashcards or 15 flashcards per day is just not much. Like, I'm just spending 5 minutes, I can do more. And the problem with this is you're not thinking about the future. With Anki, it's a spaced repetition system. The cards are going to come back at some point, and they're going to start piling up very fast. At the beginning, everything is going to be, just, what's the expression in English? Like daisies or roses. I don't know. It's all going to be good. That's my point. Doesn't matter. You're just going to spend a few minutes a day. Say you're doing 30 new flashcards. It's fine for a week. Then the second week, it starts to pile up because the reviews are coming. And after 2 weeks, it just rises. You will quickly realize that with Anki flashcards, it just grows exponentially because flashcards, they never retire. They always come back. So I would just recommend against doing more than 15 flashcards a day for people who are really dedicated. I would say if you can do at least 5 flashcards per day, you're gonna be good in the long term, right? It's already much more than what most people are doing, so don't push it. Think about the long term, right? Okay, so there is I've actually no, I haven't talked about that. It's another trap with Anki is, and another reason why you should try to hold back and not do too many cards is, for example, this card, I failed it, but as you can see, this is not a new card. It's a review card that I have actually learned many times. Now, if I click fail here, it's going to go back to its original state, meaning that at the beginning, a card has an initial state that you have to review it on day 0, then day 1, then day 2, then 4, then it's 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, and so on, right? That's fine for new cards, but in the case of this card, for example, for the Death Note card, I've reviewed it. I've already learned it like many times, and so putting it back to the initial state of the normal intervals for new cards, it doesn't make a lot of sense because here all I need is just a very light refresher. I just need to see it maybe tomorrow, and then in a week, and then in 6 months, just because it's already in my memory. I just needed a very light refresher. So that's kind of one of the traps, is if you fail even with cards that you have already learned many times, it's gonna come back and haunt you for a long time. Okay, and eventually, I just want to talk about the last thing, which is, I've already talked about it, but cards will always come back. If you're just using the normal version of Anki, if I click here, say I did it right? I just guessed the sentence, I recognized it right. I'm going to see it again in 1.3 years, right? And yeah, it's in a long time, but if you're doing Anki every day, like tomorrow, maybe I have another 50 cards that are going to appear in 1.3 years. In 1.3 years, like, just try to imagine all the cards that will have piled up at this point, right? Because it grows. You're just putting all of the cards in the future, and because you're always adding new cards, like it's over if you start doing that. Okay, I know I sound like just overly like dramatic, but that's what it is. You want it to last in the long term, because language learning is a long-term endeavor. The solution to that, fortunately, alright, the recording stopped again, not because of space, but because I'm holding this microphone in my hand, and the little thing here just unplugged for some reason. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm holding this in my hand, the microphone, is because I'm a cheap person and I bought this off of eBay, and there was no stand, but I got it for 50% of the original price. So yeah. Alright, so let's go back to what I was saying. I was talking about cards will always come back. Yes, here it's a perfect example for this card. Even if I have learned it, I don't know, maybe 8 times, 10 times, it's still gonna come back. I'm gonna click here and it's gonna come back in 1.3 years. It's a long time, but it always comes back. In 1.3 years, it's gonna tell me, schedule it for 3 years. But the point is, it's always gonna come back and haunt you. Now the thing is, you don't need it to always come back, because these words, at some point you're gonna remember them, and you're probably gonna encounter them in natural situations. If you're watching TV in Japanese or any language you're trying to learn, or you're talking with someone, at some point it's just overkill to actually go ahead and click the pass button for 3 years. There's a solution to that. Is there's an add-on for Anki that is free, and it's called MIA Retirement. It's a fairly new add-on, and you install it. There's also a tutorial here to install it on your computer. What this does is, at some point that you can set, for example 6 months or a year, cards are going to retire automatically. Which means that you're not going to see them. So if I click pass here, it's actually going to retire the card. I'm not going to see it again. And that's a good thing, because the number of cards doesn't just increase exponentially. At some point you're adding new cards, but the old cards are actually getting retired. So the number of cards stays pretty much constant if you do things right. And that's the right way to do it, because you're not going to get overwhelmed with Anki. Okay, why am I talking about all these traps? Is because with Anki, there's a huge issue where if you're spending too much time on it, you're going to get burnt out. And I'm talking about this from my own experience. A lot of people have experienced it. Doing Anki flashcards, recognition or recall doesn't matter. It's cognitively exhausting. It's really hard. It's just an intense activity, I guess. So you need to keep your Anki time to a minimum. You can do more if you want to learn faster, but think about the long term. My recommendation would be, do 5 to 15 flashcards, if new flashcards per day if you're really motivated, but 5 is fine, right? Even 10 is good. So think about this. I think I've talked about pretty much everything I wanted to cover here. If you want to learn more about Anki, how I use it, kind of the little tips and tricks, leave a comment on this video, and also subscribe if you want to new videos about language learning. I'm going to be posting a lot of videos in the future. So alright, this was Louis Lin, and I thank you for watching this video, and see you next time.